That major ruling from the Supreme Court, the justices issuing a decision allowing emergency abortion access in Idaho, at least for now. That's despite the state's strict ban on the procedure. The case marking the first major abortion ruling since the court's conservative majority struck down Roe. The justices dismissing the Idaho case without considering the core issues, instead sending it back to the lower courts. The ruling comes just one day after an opinion was posted on the court's website, then quickly taken down. The court called it an accident. Leading us off this hour, ABC senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer, also with us, Michelle Goodwin, a Georgetown law professor of constitutional law and global health policy. Devin, first to you, walk us through the ruling and why the justices decided to send it back to the lower courts.
Yeah, Phil, the ruling is very short, as you alluded to there. You can see it's one line. It says the case was improvidently granted, which means it was a mistake. We're going to stay out of it, in fact. And that ruling, that decision to kick this back to the lower courts, is frustrating advocates on both sides of this very passionate and divisive issue. What the Supreme Court's move effectively does, Phil, is it allows women going into emergency rooms in the state of Idaho, presenting with medical conditions maybe short of death, so things like sepsis or an ectopic pregnancy, that they can in fact receive an abortion if a doctor thinks that that is the best care to stabilize them and resolve the medical condition. That was up for debate in this case. And while the Supreme Court doesn't decide whether or not Idaho's ban goes too far, it effectively now allows the situation to continue in Idaho, that women can continue to receive that care. What it doesn't answer is what happens in all the other states that, like Idaho, have very strict abortion bans, offering only an exception when the woman's life is at risk. And here the standard is a little bit different, when health is at risk. So the Supreme Court, in a bunch of attached statements to this short decision, Phil, pointing the finger, very fiery rhetoric, but they leave the question, fundamental question, for another day.
Yeah, and so, Michelle, I want to bring you in here. Talk to us about the impact this ruling will have for pregnant women, not only in Idaho, but as Devin points out, nationwide.
So EMTALA is a federal law, which means that it reaches the entire country. It's the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. And for those who pay close attention to text, which typically conservatives do, in the text of the law is its application to people who are in labor or who otherwise are experiencing an emergency condition related to their reproductive health. What this means directly in Idaho, where doctors have been airlifting patients out of the state for fear that they would breach the state's anti-abortion law, it means now those doctors don't need to do that. That doesn't mean that doctors still won't be fearful. There are prosecutors who have suggested that they will prosecute doctors who violate the state's law. We saw that in the state of Texas. More broadly, as a national matter, this case is important, even though the Supreme Court says that this was improvidently granted to allow it to reach to the Supreme Court. What the court did not do is to say that EMTALA does not apply, that state laws can preempt federal laws, which was a potential outcome here. It's also worth noting Justice Alito's dissent. That dissent does not become a majority rule. His dissent was that nowhere in EMTALA is abortion read into the law. It's equally worth noting that in EMTALA, they don't mention anything like stents or heart valves, other kinds of treatments or medical devices that one might get in an emergency situation, such as with a heart attack or with a stroke. So this is a day in which women in Idaho may have a sense of relief.
Devin, the court also issued another significant ruling today, this one about opioids and Big Pharma. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Phil, the Purdue Pharma Company, which is the maker of OxyContin, was at the center of the beginnings of the opioid crisis that has claimed more than 100,000 lives in this country. It declared bankruptcy a few years ago in the face of a growing number of lawsuits from states to victims seeking damages for what this very addictive drug did and how it was marketed. But what the Supreme Court did today in a divided opinion was it struck down that bankruptcy deal, which would have paid out more than $6 billion to these victims, to the states, to clean up some of this mess. The government had argued that it was unfair that the Sackler family, which owns Purdue Pharma, would have gotten immunity from any civil claims as part of this deal. And they said negotiators are now going to have to go back to the drawing board for something better.
And we're all still waiting for that Trump absolute immunity decision from the Supreme Court, too. They're kind of holding out on that. Devin Dwyer and Michelle Goodwin, thank you both very much.